The lungless salamander challenges one of biology's most basic assumptions, that breathing requires lungs. In these animals, there is no inhale, no exhale, no rhythmic expansion of the chest. Life continues without the movement of air through internal chambers. Oxygen enters silently, diffusing across skin that never stops working. This is not an anomaly. It is an entire evolutionary strategy. Millions of years ago, ancestors of modern lungless salamanders inhabited environments where oxygen was abundant and moisture constant. Cool mountain streams, saturated forest floors, and shaded valleys provided conditions where thin skin could perform the work of lungs more efficiently than internal organs ever could. In such settings, lungs became redundant. Over time, redundancy turned into absence. Evolution does not preserve what it does not need. As lungs diminished, reliance on surface respiration intensified. Blood vessels migrated closer to the skin. Capillary networks expanded. The lining of the mouth became another respiratory surface. The entire body transformed into a breathing organ. Survival moved outward. This shift reshaped everything. Without lungs, buoyancy changed. Body density increased. Movements became grounded and deliberate. The ribcage narrowed, no longer required to protect or ventilate air-filled structures. The salamander became slimmer, lighter, and more flexible, able to navigate narrow crevices, leaf litter, and underground spaces with ease. But this design came with strict rules. Moisture is not optional. Dry skin means suffocation. Heat accelerates water loss, reducing oxygen exchange. Sunlight becomes danger. As a result, lungless salamanders are creatures of shadow and dampness. They emerge when rain falls, when humidity rises, when night cools the air. The skin is alive in ways most vertebrate skin is not. It must remain thin, permeable, and wet. Mucus secretions prevent dehydration and facilitate gas diffusion. Beneath the surface, dense networks of blood vessels transport oxygen directly to tissues. There is no buffer, no reserve. Respiration is constant or it fails. Metabolism reflects this constraint. Lungless salamanders live slowly. Energy expenditure is minimized. Movements are economical. They do not chase prey. They wait. When insects or small invertebrates pass close enough, the salamander strikes with precision, extending a sticky tongue powered by elastic tissues rather than sustained muscle effort. This feeding strategy aligns perfectly with low oxygen throughput. High-speed pursuit would overwhelm respiratory capacity. Stillness, patience, and ambush allow survival within narrow physiological limits. Behavior reinforces this economy. Activity peaks during cool, wet nights. During dry periods, salamanders retreat beneath logs, stones, or soil where humidity remains stable. Some species descend into caves or deep crevices, environments buffered against surface fluctuations. These refuges are not preferences, they are necessities. Reproduction mirrors environmental sensitivity. Many lungless salamanders rely on direct development, laying eggs in moist terrestrial locations where larvae bypass aquatic stages entirely. This reduces dependence on standing water but increases vulnerability to drying conditions. Eggs are often guarded, not from predators, but from desiccation. Communication is largely chemical. Vocal calls are absent. Instead, pheromones guide courtship, transmitted through direct contact. In dark, enclosed habitats, scent replaces sound. Reproductive success depends on proximity, timing, and environmental stability. From an ecological perspective, lungless salamanders operate quietly but powerfully. They regulate soil invertebrates, influence decomposition rates, and contribute to nutrient cycling in forest ecosystems. Their presence shapes microhabitats invisible to most animals. They are also among the first to disappear when ecosystems degrade. Pollution enters directly through skin. Temperature shifts alter moisture balance. Habitat fragmentation isolates populations that cannot disperse far. Decline happens silently. And yet, where conditions remain intact, lungless salamanders persist with remarkable consistency. Their survival is not flashy. It is precise. They do not breathe, yet they live. They do not rush, yet they endure. They do not adapt broadly, yet they persist narrowly and successfully. In the damp shadows of forests and caves, lungless salamanders continue their quiet experiment, proving that life does not require lungs, only solutions. The forest floor appears still at first glance, a quiet mosaic of damp leaves, decaying wood, and soft soil breathing slowly beneath towering trees. But beneath this silence, life persists in forms so subtle they escape casual notice. Among them moves the lungless salamander, an amphibian that exists almost invisibly, its survival dependent not on strength or speed, but on a radical biological decision made millions of years ago. This animal does not breathe in the way most vertebrates do. It has no lungs to inflate, no ribcage that rises and falls. Instead, every inch of its moist skin functions as a living respiratory surface, silently exchanging gases with the surrounding air and water. Oxygen slips inward, carbon dioxide slips out, and life continues without a single breath ever being drawn. This method of respiration shapes everything about the lungless salamander's existence. Its body is slender, elongated, and flexible, optimized to maximize surface area rather than internal volume. The skin must remain constantly moist, forcing the animal into habitats where humidity is not optional but essential. Forests rich in leaf litter, shaded stream banks, moss-covered rocks, and underground caves become not just homes, but life support systems. Dry air is not uncomfortable for this animal, it is lethal. As a result, lungless salamanders live lives of restraint, moving carefully, slowly, and mostly under cover of darkness when evaporation is low and the world becomes breathable. Evolution did not remove lungs from these creatures as a mistake. It was an advantage, forged by environmental pressure and refined over time. Early salamander ancestors inhabited fast-flowing streams where lungs would have increased buoyancy, making it difficult to remain anchored against strong currents. Losing lungs allowed these animals to stay submerged, cling to rocks, and move with precision rather than resistance. Over generations, natural selection rewarded those individuals whose skin became more efficient at gas exchange. Blood vessels crept closer to the surface, skin thinned, and respiration became fully external. What began as a structural loss became a physiological triumph. Without lungs, the lungless salamander also lost the ability to vocalize. There are no mating calls echoing through the forest, no territorial croaks or warning sounds. Communication occurs through chemical signals instead. Pheromones secreted from glands convey readiness to mate, territorial boundaries, and even individual identity. The world of the lungless salamander is not one of sound, but of scent, touch, and subtle motion. Encounters are quiet, intimate, and often brief, reducing exposure to predators while preserving energy. The body itself reflects this minimalist strategy. Limbs are short but strong, adapted for gripping uneven surfaces rather than sprinting. The tail is muscular, serving as both a balance aid and a fat storage reserve. The head is small, with eyes that appear alert but unassuming, scanning for movement rather than detail. Vision plays a role, but not a dominant one. Chemical sensing and tactile awareness dominate perception. Every movement is calculated, because excessive activity increases oxygen demand, and oxygen is acquired slowly, molecule by molecule, across skin and mouth lining. Feeding follows the same economy of motion. Lungless salamanders are opportunistic predators, consuming insects, mites, worms, and small invertebrates that inhabit the same damp environments. Their feeding strikes are rapid and precise, driven by reflex rather than chase. Energy intake is balanced carefully against energy expenditure. There is no room for waste. Every calorie matters when your body relies on passive respiration rather than powerful lungs to fuel intense bursts of activity. Social interaction among lungless salamanders is limited but not absent. Many species exhibit territorial behavior, particularly among males during breeding seasons. Territories are not defended through combat, but through scent marking and posturing. Physical confrontations are rare and brief, as injuries threaten the integrity of the skin, and damaged skin compromises respiration. Survival depends on remaining intact. Even minor wounds can become fatal if they disrupt moisture balance or invite infection. Reproduction unfolds with the same quiet efficiency. Courtship is a slow, deliberate dance involving chemical cues and gentle physical contact. In many species, fertilization is internal, with the male depositing a spermatophore that the female picks up. Eggs are laid in moist, protected locations, often guarded by the female until they hatch. Parental care, while limited, is significant in a world where desiccation and predation pose constant threats. The young emerge already shaped by the same constraints as their parents, their tiny bodies immediately dependent on moisture and shade. Unlike many amphibians, numerous lungless salamander species bypass the aquatic larval stage entirely. They hatch as miniature adults, fully terrestrial from the start. This direct development reduces reliance on standing water, allowing colonization of habitats inaccessible to other amphibians. Forest interiors, high elevations, and cave systems become viable environments. This flexibility explains why lungless salamanders are among the most diverse amphibian groups, with hundreds of species adapted to highly specific microhabitats. Yet this specialization comes at a cost. The same sensitivity that allows lungless salamanders to thrive in stable, humid environments makes them exceptionally vulnerable to change. Deforestation strips away canopy cover, drying the forest floor. Climate change alters rainfall patterns, increasing drought frequency. Pollution seeps into soil and water, compromising skin-based respiration. Because they absorb oxygen directly from their surroundings, lungless salamanders also absorb toxins just as efficiently. Their bodies become mirrors of environmental health, reflecting damage long before larger animals show symptoms. For scientists, this makes lungless salamanders invaluable indicators of ecosystem integrity. Where they disappear, something has gone wrong. Their presence signals balance, moisture, and stability. Their absence is a warning. Conservationists now recognize these animals not as obscure forest dwellers, but as keystone species in the hidden architecture of terrestrial ecosystems. Despite their importance, lungless salamanders remain largely unknown to the public. They do not roar, migrate, or dominate landscapes. Their drama unfolds on a scale measured in centimeters and seconds, in the space beneath a single fallen log. Yet their story is no less profound. It is a story of subtraction rather than addition, of survival achieved not through complexity, but through elegant simplicity. By giving up lungs, these salamanders gained access to worlds beyond the reach of their competitors. And in those quiet, damp places where breath itself becomes optional, the lungless salamander continues its ancient routine, skin glistening, heart beating slowly, exchanging life with the air one molecule at a time. The daily life of a lungless salamander unfolds in a rhythm dictated not by clocks or seasons alone, but by moisture, temperature, and the invisible chemistry of the air itself. Activity begins when the forest exhales. As evening settles and humidity rises, the salamander emerges from its shelter, not with urgency, but with intention. Every movement is measured. Speed is a luxury reserved for animals with lungs. For this creature, stillness is power. Behaviorally, lungless salamanders operate on a low-energy philosophy. They do not wander aimlessly. They patrol familiar micro-territories, often no larger than a few square meters, memorizing every crevice, every safe retreat. This spatial awareness is not learned overnight. It is built through repetition and survival. Knowing where moisture lingers longest or where predators rarely reach can mean the difference between life and death. Predators are numerous and relentless. Birds, snakes, small mammals, and even larger amphibians view lungless salamanders as easy prey. Lacking venom, armor, or speed, these salamanders rely on invisibility and chemistry. Their coloration often blends seamlessly with leaf litter and soil, mottled browns, grays, and muted reds dissolving into the background. When discovered, many species release skin secretions that taste bitter or mildly toxic, discouraging repeated attacks. It is not a weapon meant to kill, but a lesson meant to be remembered. Still, avoidance remains the primary strategy. Lungless salamanders freeze when danger approaches, trusting camouflage over motion. If escape becomes necessary, they retreat into narrow spaces predators cannot follow, cracks in rocks, spaces beneath bark, or deep within soil layers. Their flexible bodies allow passage where rigid forms fail. Evolution favored those who could slip away rather than stand the ground. Habitat diversity among lungless salamanders is astonishing. Some species inhabit lowland forests where rainfall is frequent and temperatures moderate. Others cling to life at high elevations, where cold air holds less moisture, forcing extreme behavioral adaptations. In these environments, salamanders limit activity to brief windows when conditions align perfectly. A single dry day can mean remaining hidden for weeks, surviving on stored energy, waiting patiently for the world to become breathable again. Cave-dwelling lungless salamanders take this specialization even further. In perpetual darkness, vision becomes secondary, sometimes nearly vestigial. Limbs elongate, bodies pale, and sensory perception shifts toward touch and chemical detection. Food is scarce in caves, demanding even stricter energy conservation. These salamanders may feed infrequently, consuming whatever invertebrates drift into the domain. Life here is not fast, not abundant, but steady. Survival is measured in decades rather than seasons. Social behavior remains subtle, but not absent. Though often solitary, lungless salamanders are aware of one another's presence through scent. Territories overlap slightly, forming invisible maps of ownership negotiated chemically rather than physically. During breeding periods, this balance shifts. Males become more active, following pheromone trails with surprising determination. Courtship rituals are intricate, involving tail movements, body alignment, and prolonged contact. There is no rush. Success depends on timing, compatibility, and environmental stability. The absence of lungs also shapes reproductive investment. Many lungless salamanders produce fewer eggs than their aquatic relatives, but invest more care into each one. Eggs are often laid in hidden clusters beneath logs or rocks, protected from drying out and from predators. In some species, females remain with the eggs for weeks or months, guarding them, rotating them to prevent fungal growth, and maintaining moisture levels. This level of parental care is rare among amphibians and highlights the evolutionary value of each offspring in a challenging environment. Development without an aquatic larval stage fundamentally changes population dynamics. Juveniles emerge already adapted to terrestrial life, reducing mortality associated with ponds drying up or becoming polluted. However, this also means they immediately face the same constraints as adults. There is no grace period. From the moment they hatch, the skin must function flawlessly. Any disruption in moisture, temperature, or air quality can be fatal. The role of lungless salamanders within ecosystems is both quiet and profound. As predators of small invertebrates, they regulate populations that influence soil health and decomposition rates. By controlling insect numbers, they indirectly affect plant growth and nutrient cycling. Their burrowing and movement aerate soil, facilitating water absorption and microbial activity. Though small, their cumulative impact shapes the structure of forest floors. They also serve as prey, transferring energy upward through food webs. Their disappearance creates gaps that ripple outward, altering predator behavior and invertebrate populations. In ecosystems where lungless salamanders decline, scientists often observe cascading effects, increased insect outbreaks, soil degradation, and reduced biodiversity. These animals act as stabilizers, quietly maintaining equilibrium. Human activity increasingly disrupts this balance. Logging opens canopies, exposing the forest floor to sunlight and drying winds. Roads fragment habitats, isolating populations and preventing genetic exchange. Even subtle changes, like altered leaf litter composition or soil compaction, can render habitats uninhabitable. Because lungless salamanders cannot migrate long distances or adapt quickly to new conditions, local extinctions become permanent losses. Climate change intensifies these pressures. Rising temperatures increase evaporation, shrinking the windows of safe activity. Irregular rainfall patterns destabilize moisture-dependent ecosystems. Extreme weather events, once rare, now occur with greater frequency, flooding habitats one year and desiccating them the next. For animals whose survival depends on consistency, variability itself becomes a threat. Yet resilience persists. Some lungless salamander species demonstrate remarkable adaptability, shifting activity patterns, altering microhabitat use, and adjusting reproductive timing. Evolution continues, albeit slowly. These changes do not make headlines, but they reflect life's enduring capacity to respond, molecule by molecule, generation by generation. To observe a lungless salamander is to witness an alternative blueprint for vertebrate life. One that rejects excess, embraces limitation, and turns vulnerability into specialization. In a world obsessed with speed, growth, and dominance, this creature survives by doing less, needing less, and wasting nothing. As human influence stretches deeper into forests and mountains, the lungless salamander faces a form of danger it did not evolve to recognize. There is no single predator to avoid, no clear season to hide from. The threat is systemic, woven into air currents, soil chemistry, and climate patterns. For a creature that breathes through its skin, the environment is not merely a setting. It is an organ, and when that organ begins to fail, survival becomes a biological gamble. Pollution is among the most immediate and insidious pressures. Agricultural runoff introduces pesticides and fertilizers into soils and streams, altering microbial communities and contaminating moisture layers essential for respiration. Heavy metals accumulate silently, passing through skin barriers and interfering with cellular processes. Unlike animals with lungs or protective barriers, lungless salamanders cannot filter what they absorb. Oxygen enters freely, but so do toxins. Their bodies record environmental damage with brutal honesty. Habitat fragmentation compounds this vulnerability. Forests once continuous are now divided by roads, fields, and urban edges. For lungless salamanders, even small gaps can become impassable deserts. Dry ground, exposed sunlight, and compacted soil create lethal barriers. Isolated populations lose genetic diversity, reducing resilience to disease and environmental change. Over time, inbreeding weakens lineages that once thrived through quiet abundance. Disease adds another layer of pressure. Fungal pathogens, particularly those affecting amphibian skin, disrupt respiration directly. A compromised skin surface is not just an infection site, it is a suffocation risk. Outbreaks can spread rapidly through populations that live in close proximity and share moist environments. Entire species have declined within decades, their disappearance often unnoticed until silence replaces what little presence they once had. Climate change accelerates all of these threats simultaneously. Rising global temperatures shift humidity patterns, drying forests that once remained moist year-round. Snowpack loss in mountainous regions alters stream flow, reducing groundwater seepage that sustains subterranean habitats. Seasonal predictability dissolves. For animals whose life cycles depend on stable conditions, unpredictability is catastrophic. Yet within this grim landscape, conservation science has begun to recognize the lungless salamander not merely as a victim, but as a guide. Because of their sensitivity, these animals serve as early warning systems. Protecting them means protecting entire ecosystems. Conservation strategies increasingly focus on preserving microhabitats rather than broad landscapes alone. Fallen logs are left in place. Leaf litter is protected. Riparian buffers are restored. Shade is valued as infrastructure. In some regions, conservationists have successfully stabilized populations by reconnecting fragmented habitats, reforesting corridors, and limiting chemical exposure. These efforts do not require dramatic intervention. They require restraint. The same restraint lungless salamanders have practiced for millions of years. From an evolutionary perspective, the future of lungless salamanders remains uncertain but not predetermined. Evolution favors adaptability, and while these animals change slowly, they are not static. Subtle shifts in skin composition, behavior timing, and reproductive strategies already hint at ongoing adjustment. Whether these changes can keep pace with rapid environmental transformation is the central question. If lungless salamanders were to vanish, the loss would extend far beyond their own lineage. Forest ecosystems would lose a key regulator of invertebrate populations. Soil processes would shift, nutrient cycles would destabilize, predators would lose a food source. The disappearance would be quiet, but the consequences would echo. Their story challenges a dominant narrative of survival through expansion and conquest. Lungless salamanders represent a different evolutionary philosophy. Survival through integration, through harmony with environment rather than control over it. They do not impose themselves on the world. They merge with it. In studying them, humans confront an uncomfortable truth. Survival does not always reward the loudest, the fastest, or the strongest. Sometimes it rewards those who adapt so completely to their surroundings that they almost disappear into them. And perhaps that is why their fate matters. Because in a changing world, the creatures most closely tied to balance are the first to fall. To understand the lungless salamander fully is to step outside the usual framework through which life is judged. This is not an animal defined by spectacle. It does not dominate landscapes, migrate across continents, or command attention through sound or size. Its power lies elsewhere, in refinement rather than expansion, in precision rather than excess. It is a living argument against the idea that complexity always requires addition. Sometimes, survival is achieved through subtraction. The loss of lungs was not an evolutionary accident. It was a decision written slowly into flesh by pressure, constraint, and opportunity. By removing an organ, evolution unlocked entire ecosystems. Without lungs, the salamander could remain submerged in cold streams, disappear into soil, retreat into caves, and colonize environments where others could not follow. This choice reshaped not only anatomy, but behavior, reproduction, perception, and time itself. Life slowed down. Efficiency replaced urgency. In the lungless salamander, we see a form of biological minimalism taken to its logical extreme. Every function serves multiple purposes. Skin is not just protection, it is respiration, sensory interface, chemical communicator. Movement is not just locomotion, it is negotiation with moisture, temperature, and oxygen availability. Nothing is wasted, nothing is ornamental. Every trait exists because it must. This organism also reframes how intelligence is understood in nature. Intelligence here is not problem-solving through cognition, but alignment through physiology. The lungless salamander does not outthink its environment. It becomes inseparable from it. When conditions are favorable, it moves. When they are not, it waits. This patience is not passivity. It is strategy encoded at the cellular level. There is a quiet lesson embedded in this way of living. In a world increasingly defined by acceleration, extraction, and noise, the lungless salamander survives by refusing excess. It takes only what it needs. It leaves no visible mark. Its presence is felt not through dominance, but through balance. Forests where it thrives are stable, resilient, alive in ways that do not announce themselves loudly. The tragedy is that such species are the least equipped to survive rapid disruption. Their strength is stability, and instability is now the defining feature of the modern world. When moisture patterns shift, when forests fragment, when air and soil become chemically altered, the salamander has no alternative mode. There is no backup system. Its body cannot be recalibrated overnight. The same specialization that once guaranteed success becomes a liability. And yet, even now, they persist. Beneath logs, inside caves, along shaded streams, lungless salamanders continue their ancient exchange with the air. Oxygen in, carbon dioxide out, life maintained through surfaces so thin they almost disappear. Each individual represents millions of years of refinement, a lineage that chose a quieter path and followed it with absolute commitment. If they vanish, the loss will not announce itself with silence. There was little sound to begin with. The loss will be felt instead through imbalance, through soil that behaves differently, through insects that multiply unchecked, through forests that lose subtle resilience. The absence of the lungless salamander would be a subtraction from the world, not just of a species, but of a philosophy of survival. In the end, the lungless salamander does not teach us how to conquer environments. It teaches us how to belong to them. And in a century defined by separation from nature, that lesson may be more valuable than ever.